John McMullen is brought to you by JC Motorsports, your truck accessory warehouse with the largest showroom in South Jersey. JC's got it. McMullen's got it. All the information you need on the Eagles at 97.3ESPN.com. At JF McMullen on Twitter, John. Hey, look, the guy Wentz played pretty well yesterday, but that's not put him in Canton yet. But what I want to ask you is the areas on top of this performance, the numbers were pretty good. What areas stood out that make you say, you know what, the Eagles may have – I'm not saying he's the man, he's not the franchise quarterback, blah, blah, but what are some of the things that you would say, you know what, you should be interested and intrigued by this guy?
Well, number one, he hit some tight windows that are very, very difficult passes to make in this league, and he did it in his first NFL start. Granted, against perhaps the worst team in football, and that's what you have to add into the equation. But nonetheless, the two touchdown throws are perfect examples. Those are so well placed over the outside shoulder of Jordan Matthews, and then in the bucket for Nelson Agholor. You could have walked the ball over to Nelson and not put it in a better place for him to catch the football. So, and then there were a number of other throws down the field. He was particularly effective throwing the football past 10 yards, and that's something obviously Sam Bradford was not all that good at, despite the claims of accuracy. And so that was the most impressive part for me, is the fact that he was making throws you see really, really good veteran quarterbacks struggle with at times, and he made them with ease. So when you talk about the skill set to play this position, that's the part I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple examples that I pointed out. The fourth down throw with the blitz coming right up the middle at him, that's one, because he gets hit. He knows he's getting hit, and he stands down there and makes a throw. I thought the other throw to Ertz, the one that Ertz makes the circus catch, but he throws that ball where only Ertz can get it. The pass he makes to Agholor on the touchdown. Joe Hayden's in Aguilar's hip pocket, and he dumps that in there. And he recognized a couple of times where the blitzes were coming. I mean, he just looked like a guy that the game was moving at a normal pace, where some of these rookies, including Robert Griffin III, who's not a rookie but hadn't played in a year, he just looked like he was uncomfortable a lot yesterday. Wentz did not.
Yeah, and that's what the Eagles talked a lot about, the fact that forget about where he played. Look at what he played, and the fact that North Dakota State used a pro-style offense, and he had autonomy at the line of scrimmage, whereas a guy like Jared Goff, obviously, who's picked one spot ahead of him, plays in that Bear Raid offense out at Cal, and he looks lost trying to go through NFL progressions early on. That's not to say he can't learn or become a good NFL quarterback, but he's going to have to learn at the professional level. And Carson's ahead of that because he was asked to do some of those things. He's very comfortable at the line of scrimmage. He's very comfortable on those kill plays where you can change from run to pass or vice versa, or you can change sides in the running game. He's already ahead of the curve as far as that goes. And you brought up something that I also saw, Mike, is those back shoulder fades. He's just a natural at it. And if you see Aaron Rodgers do it, who's the best quarterback in football in my mind, that's a play that's indefensible. And you saw the great catch by Zach Ertz. That was true. It's a one-handed catch, but still the placement of the football was tremendous. And if he can continue to do that on a consistent level, there's going to be a lot of fun in Philadelphia over the next few years.
Yeah, people would say, well, pump the brakes, it's only Cleveland. But some of the throws he made, the defenders were in the right spots. He just made the throw, so it doesn't matter if it's a Cleveland defender, a Giant defender, a Redskin defender. They had good coverage. He just made a throw that they couldn't do anything about.
Yeah, you're right. And the consistency from week to week is the difficult part for young players. And I don't expect it to be that good every week. I don't expect the placement of the football to be consistent at that level because it can't be. I mean, If it was, we would be ordering the bus for Kent. It's just not possible. That's how well some of the placement was in his first NFL game. And there's going to be hiccups along the way, but there's nothing but positives coming out of that performance. And anybody trying to downplay it by talking about the Cleveland Browns, you're right. I mean, the coverage on Nelson Agholor on that touchdown, that's good NFL coverage, no matter what team you're facing.
Well, and that's Joe Hayden too, John. That's Joe Hayden making the coverage on Agholor.
Exactly.
He's a heck of a player.
Very good player. Yeah, very good player. Some of those back shoulder fades we talked about. Defensive back is right there. You're placing the football only where the receiver can get to it. That's what you want from an upper echelon cornerback. So, again, this is the NFL. This is not college football. This is not Alabama against Western Kentucky. Even the Cleveland Browns acknowledge that they're probably the worst team in football. There's still a lot of good players on that side of the ball. That's what I mentioned last week. Hayden's one of them. Joe Thomas on offense. They have good players at certain positions. So it's not akin to a big-time level program at the college level just rolling over a nothing team. There are still really, really good players out there.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. John, there was a lot of, I don't want to say dissension, that's not the right word at all, but there were veterans that might not have been happy with this deal. Did Carson Wentz win those guys over?
Well, I think he made them real happy for one afternoon. I'm not sure if he won them over because guys like Jason Peters, they've seen a lot. They understand that one game in September doesn't mean every game's going to be like this. But I think everybody, even Doug Peterson, who has been very, very optimistic throughout this process, I think if he was being honest, he didn't expect it to be this good. I don't think anybody did. So, and by the way, if there were a couple drops by Jordan Matthews, a couple drops by Darren Sproles, it would have even been better. The drops still existed for this team. So I think everybody is a little more comfortable because there was a narrative that it was going to be really, really ugly. And if the Eagles were going to win that game, they would probably do it with defense or special teams. And in spite of the young guy who was going to struggle, and it was the exact opposite. He was the best player on the offensive side of the football, arguably the best player on the team out there. And I don't think, if anybody's being honest, I don't think anyone saw that coming.
You're probably right. I think, and you mentioned the drops, but while there were drops, the receivers certainly elevated their play from what we saw last year. I mean, Jordan Matthews, he had the drop to start the game, but he made a couple of tough catches, made a couple of sliding catches, got himself open, had 7 for 114, had a big day. Nelson Agholor was able to get separation, something we haven't seen a heck of a lot from him. And that's, I thought Ertz was a big factor. The kind of the security blanket, made a nice catch, the fourth down play. And then you got Dorial Green-Beckham, who was not really a big factor because he really wasn't game plan. They really had a small sample. You hope that they could use this as a confidence builder because these guys are all high draft picks, John. So there's a potential there that something could surprise us.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the past, and when I would argue about Sam Bradford, and I thought he had a ceiling as a player, I think the great quarterbacks in this league elevate the receivers around them. I think you've seen it time and time again, and that's what Carson Wentz did. He elevated the play of the receivers around him. That's the best Nelson Agholor has ever looked in his NFL career. The drops were still there. Jordan Matthews, as you mentioned, the consistency, he's got to work on that. Because some of the drops are obviously concentration-based. It's not that he has bad hands. It's just that he kind of loses focus at times. And all of a sudden, you have this quarterback that can get you the football down the field, and he drops the first pass of the game, and then he comes back on the same drive and makes a great catch over the shoulder on the touchdown. So he elevated his play. You mentioned Zach Ertz. Unfortunately, he's injured, and we'll see how that works moving forward. but he makes the great one-handed catch. It just seems like when you have a quarterback that you know the football is going to move around, it's going to go different places. It's not always going to be the check down. He's going to be pushing things down the field. It just seems to keep receivers more engaged into the action. I think you saw that, and I think it is only going to get better as DGB learns more of the offense and gets more involved. For instance, you had that one fade pass to Jordan Matthews. I thought that should have been a touchdown. It was a perfectly thrown ball. It didn't hook up, and probably if you are throwing it to the 6'5" receiver who's really, really good at that, instead of Jordan, it might have been a touchdown. And as he gets more involved in this offense, there's a chance it gets a lot better down the line.
John, yeah, and it's funny because there was a stat yesterday. I think Carson Wentz was 8 for 8 against the blitz yesterday. Last year, Eagles quarterbacks were 51% against the blitz, third worst in the NFL. That's an example of him, number one, having the confidence to stick in there, but two, having a little confidence in his receivers, too, that he could throw the ball up there and they're going to make a play.
Yeah, and that's sort of the gunslinger mentality everyone talked about with him. And some of the names you hear, you saw the Brett Favre, like when the one bad snap, he picked it up and he almost completed the pass. That's something you would see from Brett Favre. And in years past, you kind of know if that happened, quarterback's just going to fall on the ball. You're probably going to lose 8 yards and go on to the next play. But he's got a little bit of that gambler in him. Now, it's going to cost him at times. Down the road, you're going to see an interception that's maybe trying to force it into a window. He shouldn't try to force it in. So it's not all going to be peaches and cream, but the fact that you have a guy who's willing to push the football down the field, willing to put the defense on notice, that opposing defensive coordinators are going to pay a lot of attention to that and realize, hey, we can't jump this route. He might go over the top. So there's a lot about his skill set that's going to help this offense, help the receivers, and help everybody else because it's going to create spacing for the running backs. Just having a kid like that out there who likes to stretch the football field creates a lot of problems for opposing defense.
John, yeah, and I thought, Peterson deserves to get some credit here, but I thought the game plan was great. They didn't ask him to do too much. They allowed him, though, to take some shots, but they didn't put the game in his lap. He basically tapped on the window and told Peterson, hey, you can give me a little bit more. But Peterson was very smart in just kind of giving him little bits and pieces of here's a little more, but never really said, you need to go win the game for us.
No, I thought it was a great game plan early, especially because what he did is he got him out of the pocket early, and that's what he does best. That's what he's most comfortable with, moving the pocket, using his athleticism, and that got him some confidence. And once he got that confidence, he had the great first drive, which was nearly perfect and would have been perfect if Matthews didn't drop the first ball. You could just sense the confidence rising. And from that point, you saw more plays from the pocket, and that's where he kept giving him a little bit more as far as progressions. You saw it in his body language. When he would go up to the line of scrimmage, he was very comfortable looking over at the defense. He was very comfortable, as I said, with those kill options as far as changing things from a run, whether it's side to side or run to pass or pass to run. It's just he really is. Doug often talks about the intangibles and the fact that he's very comfortable in his skin, and he really, really is. He looks at it. He's got a good frame of mind. He constantly says it's just a game. We'll see how long that's able to continue, because a lot of fans don't think it's just a game and they take it like it's life and death. But he's got this great sense about him where the stage isn't too big, and it's shocking to a lot of people. I think when Doug would say that, most people didn't believe him because they said, He comes from the Fargo Dome. What's going to happen when he's on an NFL field? To him, it's no different. And that's a great trait to have because he's not overcome by the enormity of the moment. I think you saw that yesterday.
Yeah, there's certain guys. They're usually labeled special, where everything's just slow and they can make the adjustment and that they don't get rattled. And maybe you're seeing that. Who knows? We'll see Monday night when there's a new challenge, Monday Night Football, Eagles, Bears. John, I want to look at the defense real fast because in reality, Wentz played well, but the defense set up a lot for him. I mean, in the second half specifically, I thought Fletcher Cox being double-teamed really just allowed Barwin, and Barwin blew past Joe Thomas, so you see the rotation, healthy, fresh bodies out there. Curry, who was getting held almost every play, it seemed like, out there. Graham getting to the quarterback. I think a lot of that was set up by Fletcher Cox.
Yeah, I agree. And you saw Jim Schwartz and what he believes defensively. He wants to rush with 4 people. He doesn't want to blitz, and that enables you to do a lot more on the back end. It wasn't great in the first half. There wasn't a ton of pass rush, but as you started to extend the lead, you have a couple of things happening. One, you can pin your ears back. You know that. 2, you're fresh because the rotation is in. And 3, when's the last time the Eagles won the time of possession battle?
And significantly.
Yeah, it was 40-20 basically. I mean, 2/3 of the game they had the football, and all of a sudden you look at the snap counts, and the Eagles defense was on the field for 52 snaps. They're usually out there in the Chip Kelly, Bill Davis regime 85 times a game, and that's going. Now it's not going to be that good every week. We understand that, but you can sense the difference and how that will affect the team come the second half. They're not going to be worn down in the second half of the season like they usually are. And as we often talk about, in the micro sense of this defense, even when Bill Davis was here, even when Chip Kelly was here, the Eagles had good players. You would look at Fletcher Cox and say, hey, he's playing good football. Benny Logan's playing good football. Brandon Graham is a better player than people think he is. Malcolm Jenkins is a Pro Bowl level safety. And you would look at the individual positions and say, these guys are playing pretty well, but then you would look at the actual results, and it was bad. And it was bad because they were always on the field, and they were worn down. And that fact alone is going to change a lot of things for this defense.
That's something we talked a lot about previewing the season last week, was that this defense will be better just because they're not on the field nearly as much. And I thought you saw that in the third and fourth quarter, specifically in that fourth quarter where they had a Fletcher Cox sack, a Barwin sack, a Graham sack. I mean, they seemed like they were all over him late in that game. And now we know that, the defensive line does have the ability to get to the passer, and we'll see how that evolves as this season goes on. I do want to get into some news and notes moving forward here because there was some news today from Doug Peterson, and that is Zach Ertz. It looks like he will not play most likely Monday night. He said week to week, didn't specifically say he was out, but a displaced rib up near his collarbone area. Finished the game with that yesterday, but will not be able to move on. And he said it's not a pain tolerance thing, it's a danger thing, that if it gets hit in that area again, something dangerous could happen. So it looks like he'll be out. How does that affect the offense? But my question really becomes, too, Trey Burton, who had a really good camp, do they use him in a similar fashion that they used Ertz?
Yeah, I think so. They're going to have to, because you kind of saw what Zach means to this offense as pass-catching tight end. And Brent Selleck's a good football player, and he's a really well-rounded player as far as being a receiver, an outlet receiver, and a blocker. But he just can't stretch the field and the seam like Zach Ertz can, whereas Trey Burton has the athleticism to do that. Doesn't have the size or the catching radius of the Zach Ertz, but he's going to be very, very important to this team. And we talked about before the calf injury, I thought he was going to be a bigger presence in this offense. And as you mentioned, what Doug talked about with the injury, they can say it's week to week all they want. This sounds like a multi-week injury by how they're describing it. And the question is, not is he going to be on the field in Chicago next Monday, but how long is he going to be out? And if he's out for a significant period, whether that's 3-4 games, whatever, they're going to have to get some production from other tight ends. And I think it starts with Trey Burton. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, and Burton, tell us a little bit about what you saw, because he's a guy who might not be as big as Ertz, but he can run. He's an athlete, was a quarterback, was a wideout. They might find a little something here, and then that might make the offense evolve even more when Ertz returns.
Yeah, I mean, you never like to lose a player who's that good and that important to your offense, but it could be a silver lining. And, yeah, I mean, Trey Burton's a tremendous athlete, and in training camp and practice, both in practices and preseason games, the Eagles would split him out wide at times. They would use him all over the field as far as trying to create mismatches, even outside the numbers, trying to get sort of a linebacker to come out there. So you do a couple things with that. Obviously, it's a mismatch as far as coverage goes, but also by taking a linebacker all the way out to the outside of the defense, all of a sudden you could run the football with Ryan Matthews inside and create a mismatch that way. So he's a different player than Zach. As you said, he's much smaller. He's not much of a blocker, even lesser so than Zach, because that's not the strength of his game either. But you can use him in different ways, and I think that's the one thing Doug has proven very adept at early in his career as the coach here. He's going to look at the talents of the players he has, and he's going to utilize them. And Trey has a little bit of a different skill set than Ertz and Selleck, and I think he's going to utilize it as best he can.
Yeah, and the other injury, McKelvin, who he missed a lot of yesterday, and Jalen Mills, that's why you saw a lot of him on the field. But if McKelvin is out for an extended period of time, and potentially this week, which is possible with a hamstring injury, is it Mills that steps in there? C.J. Smith, does he get elevated and get game time right away, or do they go out to the street?
Well, this is one of the problems, and we kind of talked about with the trade of Eric Rowe, and I didn't like this trade for this exact scenario. I mean, Leotis has a history of injuries. And all of a sudden, by trading Eric Rowe, even though he wasn't in your plans for week one, you become very, very thin at the position if an injury does happen. And it crops up right away with a hamstring, which, as you know, Mike, can be a nagging thing when you talk about thoroughbred-type players, whether it's receivers or corners that need to rely on their legs and sort of need to go all out running all the time. That can become an issue that lingers throughout the season. So it's a concern, yeah, but Jalen obviously is going to be elevated to start. You have to bring up C.J. Smith or sign somebody off the street if he's not able to go this week. You can't go into an NFL game in today's environment with just three healthy corners. I mean, you just can't do that. So I think the most likely option is simply promoting C.J. Smith, but we'll see how serious they think this is going to be. The best case scenario, obviously, would be to get Leotis out there. But a hamstring injury in his history, it's something to worry about.
Yeah, we'll see how he progresses with that, because they seemed like they were making a bigger deal about Ertz, but when I hear hamstring, that bothers me a little bit. Leotis McKelvin, you said, John, during the training camp sessions was the best player in that secondary. They didn't miss him yesterday, but we'll see if they can move on without him. We'll have more on the Eagles this week. Of course, John, every day at 4:05 right here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. For more on the Eagles, check out McMullen's Quick Hits at 97.3ESPN.com. He's also got an update from today's injury with Zach Ertz. How long could he be out for? We'll try to get more information on that throughout the week here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, one's in the books. We'll get ready for Monday night next week, and John will be here in studio. We'll break down a lot more tomorrow on the show. Thanks, pal.
All right, thanks.